Hi, my name is Pandora. Welcome to part 2 of tracing an image in SCAL and also covering print and cut. The very last thing I said was this is when I would send it to print. And just for the benefit of the video, what I've done is set it all up again. So I would go to my cutter. Now, one of the things that you will find people will try to do, and it really doesn't work, is they go click on print, and then they find that it doesn't print the registration marks. So please, you do not do it that way if you want to do print and cut. What you need to do is come up to cutter and come down to where it says cut with. Mine says silver bullet, which I adore, I have to say, but whatever your cutter is. So click on cut with your cutter, and then down here in this window, which appears at the bottom, there is this button, and the button says print plus cut, and you want to click on that. When it comes up, it actually does tell you you must print using the print button below in order to print your artwork with the required registration marks. Now, I know in the first part we checked umpteen times to see that the registration marks were visible, so now I'm going to click on print, and I'm going to click on OK, and then hopefully my printed dialog box will come up, said she looking over her shoulder. It's having a think, here it comes. And again, one last check, yes, I can see all of those 1, 2, 3 registration marks. So I'm going to send it to print, and in a second or so, hopefully you'll hear my printer start to churn through. And I apologise, it's going to cause a bit of noise, it's a little bit noisy as a printer. Anyway, quick mention, the next button says Calibrate Laser. Now, if I click on it, it would walk through how to calibrate the laser. I have mine calibrated, I don't want to change it, but I would want to say here, when it says Edit Values, if you click on this, it will tell you the current values that your laser is calibrated to. Please, please, please do a screen grab, get a piece of paper, keep these somewhere safe. Preferably, that's just my printer finishing in the background here, preferably write them down or print them off or do something with them and then stick them on your printer, because one day you're going to lose them and you're going to have to do it all over again. So if you've got it right, write them down, keep them. I'm just going to click on cancel because I don't want to calibrate my laser. I must say you only need to do it once. Well, you need to do it until it is accurate. Once it is accurate, you never need to do it again. It should just remember it. But that's why you need to write the values down in case for some reason your computer crashes and something happens and, I don't know, you lose it. That would be terribly sad. So you don't want to do that. So what we now need to do is to start thinking about setting it up on the mat. And I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to do a little bit of filming on my mat just so I can show you some interesting things, the things you need to think about while you set it on the mat. Now, we've printed out the sheet of paper and I put it on my mat onto my silver bullet. One thing I want to talk about is where you put this piece of a card or whatever it is you're going to cut. If you can see here on the right-hand side, this is the side of my machine. And I've actually switched the laser on so you can see it. So this is the laser. That's where that is, and this is where the blade is. This little graphic I've drawn is my just trying to make sure you can understand what I'm on about here. So, the point being that the laser is here and the blade is here. Now, it's approximately 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters between the two. If, let me just take this piece of paper out of the way, you should set up your registration mark, and it's positioned like this. Can you see that the laser is quite unable to get to it because this carriage housing is right up against the edge? So one of the things that you really want to do when you're doing print and cut is do not jam it up against this edge, okay? Make sure that it is away from it, and then you will see that this is the point, and let me just try and do this. If I can get this underneath here sufficiently, when it's lined up, it will go darker. Can you see how now I've got it under here? On the spot, it goes darker. if I move it again away, I'm sorry, my pen, I've got my hand here, it's in the way. If I move it away, it gets lighter. When I get it onto the spot, it goes duller. It actually goes much duller on the actual print and cut. So that's when you know you're off center. If it's looking a bit bright, you're not. If it's looking a bit darker, you are right. Something to remember. But don't set it up here on this edge. Okay, do what I've done. Hopefully I can move the camera slightly. It's enormously difficult trying to get this to show everything I want it to show because of the lighting involved. So what I've done is actually I've set it up across here. Now the other thing that you need to do is, can you see this white line on my cutter? That white line is the cutting line where the blade actually cuts. It's really important that the registration marks are behind, that's why I picked up a pen, I thought it might be easier on my finger, that the registration mark here is behind this white line. So what I'm going to do is take it offline and move it back a bit. Or you can actually just release the clamps and make sure that I push it back. And what I'm doing is lining up the line on my mat, so I know this is square on my mat and this is square, so it's the best of my ability, it's square. So I can now see that my blade, my laser and everything is in front of that registration mark. So please check that. If you're trying to do print and cut and your machine goes into pause, it is probably because it can't get to that registration mark. So please be careful of that. Give yourself some space for it to work. So we've got the paper printed, we've got it on the mat, and we've got the mat positioned in the right place. How do we actually go through the next part? Well, just before I do it, I got a quick note from Lessa asking about fold lines and how would you do that. Just to make it simple, I'm going to zoom in on a piece of the mat down here where there's nothing. If you want to draw a line in SCAL, you need to use the pen tool, which is what we've been using in order to trace. However, if we click on the pen tool, and I'm using roughly the shape of the box as my guide, so I'm going to click on here, which is roughly about where I want the line to start, and then I'm going to move across and use the mat grid in order to line up and click again. And as I've said, I've got another video which you should look at about custom fold lines and editing dashed lines. So that's what you do. You click and then click again, then press the escape key. Change to your selection tool and then come across, and I'm just going to turn the fill off, and I'm going to choose a nice bright blue again so we can see it on the screen. Under here, under Edit Line Styles, for the purposes of this, I'm just going to use the first dashed line and leave it as type cut. As I say, I have got another video which will explain more about how to edit, and it's worth looking about so you get less dashes and more spaces. So now I need to move this into position. I'm just going to move the mat up ever so slightly. This is where, let me get the selection tool, this is where the fold line is. It runs across here. What I want to do, because the likelihood of me moving these two other groups while I'm doing this is quite high, what I would use is one of the facilities in the layer palette down here on the right. I would click on this little blank button here, which is the cut line, and lock it, and also lock the original image. That means I can't get to them and I can't move them no matter what I do, so I can mess around with these lines quite sufficiently. So I don't quite know why that cut line changed back again. Let's make sure it's a dotted line. And when I select it, I'm going to click and drag it and place it where we want it on there. So that's simply what I do. I would then come over here. I might rename it so I know what it is. You'll work out I'm quite a fan of renaming things. So this is my dash line. Yep, so I'm going to put dash there and click on OK. And then what I can do is simply right click and say at the top here, duplicate layer. So having right clicked, I've now got a copy. I'm going to select back onto it and move it up the screen. And if I just grab the edge here, because I've got the other layers locked, it makes it so much easier. If you don't lock them, it's very easy to move it in the right way. And this seems to be slightly longer for some reason, so I'm just going to grab the end here and make it slightly shorter. So now it's positioned where I want it to go. What I would do then is select this one, hold the Shift key down, select this one, so I've got both of them selected, come across here and unlock the padlock on the cut line, and then click where I know it is, and I can see that's also now selected because I've got a much bigger box, and I would go Object and Group, just so they're all one group. And if you look in the Layers palette, you can see it's changed. Under here, I've now got a group which consists of the cut line and the dashed lines. So just something for you to know, if you want to do dash lines, that's how I would tackle it. So I've changed this back to 70% so we can see the entire mat again. And I'm going to whip through this next bit quite quickly because I want to film it and keep under the 15-minute rule with YouTube. So to send it to Print and Cut, we go to Cutter, we click on Cut with my cutter, whatever yours is. We select Print and Cut, and this dialog box comes up. Assuming you've already printed it, set it on the mat, etc., you click on Next. What will happen is it will move the cutter to this top left-hand corner, and then you can use the arrow keys, the up, down, left, right arrow keys to position it over that mark. When you've done that, click on Next. It will go looking for the top right mark. Again, Shift will make it move in bigger increments. Control will make the arrow keys move in smaller increments so you can be more accurate. When you've got that one, click on Next, do the same thing again, and then click on Cut, and it will send it to the cutter. Let's see it in action. And what I've done is bring up the Print and Cut window, and I'm now going to click on Next. And what you hopefully will see is the machine moving across to the registration marks. And currently I'm using the arrows on the keyboard to move them across. When I get close to the mark, I'm actually going to hold down the Control key, and that allows me to move the laser in smaller increments. Let me just turn the camera because it's just slightly out of position here. So hopefully you can see I can move it, and I don't know if you can see there it's lighter, and there it's just noticeably darker, and I'm just checking that's about as accurate as I can get it. I'm going to click on Next. Here it goes, and again it's not quite on the registration mark. You can see it getting brighter there. When it's on the line it's darker. I'm now going to use the up arrow key, and I've missed the mark. It's a bit difficult trying to make sure you're seeing what I can see. Right, there we go. Can you see it's got much darker there? Let's move it that way slightly. And you can actually take some time doing this. You don't have to rush it. As long as you move the keys, it'll keep with you. Now I'm going to click on Next. It's looking for the last mark, and again, I'm holding down the Control key while I'm doing this, and there, I think that's pretty spot on. So I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to click on Cut. And at the moment, what it's going to do is cut the file lines that I've written, which should be quite noisy. Luckily, there are only two. And there we are, all cut out. Let me just release the clamps from the back here. Because of all the lights and things I've got. And here, I'll put it back where you can see it. I'll just put it on the outside edge here. Here is the box cut out, and let's just leave it there where you can see it. So that's the whole box out, and as you can see, very quick process. So what started off as a video about tracing an image has ended up being about print and cut as well. I hope that's answered a lot of questions. If you do have any queries, please feel free to email me at myrequest@btinternet.com, and I'll do my very best to answer you. I wish you all a very happy, healthy and safe New Year. Thank you for listening.